you believe in truth, then you believe in absolute truth. And if you believe in absolute truth, then you believe that every human being needs to obviously align with that absolute truth, right? For example, is it wrong to cut in line? Yes, of course it is. It has been wrong to cut in line since the creation of humanity, in every culture, in every country, at any point in history. Yes, objective, absolute truth exists, and we would all want others to follow it. Well, so must we. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Greg Stewart, and this is week 7 in the series to promote my book, I Cubed, Unlock the Inner Strength Behind Your Negative Emotions, coming out January 21st of 2025. What I've done for a living my whole life, both within myself and in helping others, in my roles as a pastor, counselor, RTC director, professor, leadership coach, and consultant, is to help others change from a theoretical standpoint. That objective truth trumps subjective experience. There's a place we should develop to from where we are currently. And that all-out obsession of the eradication of the blind area, as I discussed last week. Objective truth, as detailed, comes from external sources: our parents, our family, our friends, society, culture, and the like. In addition, and most importantly, objective truth comes from God. What every religion has in common, obviously, are the commitments to morality, selflessness, and the pursuit of wisdom, right? So anyone or anything that has influence in our lives suggests items to us that they believe should be included in our point B. Objective truth says to us, this is what we must be. So we first must agree to adopt that opinion or dismiss it. And if we agree with it, adding it to our list only creates more distance from our point A, where we are currently, to our point B, where we need to go. And we will all experience tension within us because the paradox of what is versus what should be. It's the human experience. So we burn copious amounts of emotional energy trying to reconcile the disconnect between what others believe about us and what we believe about ourselves. Even if we agree, we're not nearly as motivated, obviously, to do those things that people tell us to do because it wasn't produced from within us to begin with. However, now that we know that there are new areas in the point B that we should become, we must incorporate those outside objective point of views into us because why? It's true. And it can be painful, but nevertheless, we are now obligated to create a strategy, the paths, by which we achieve the success of transitioning from those items, being unreached goals, to being a true part of who we are, creating a new status quo. Now, to be sure, don't think that the two lists and the point B are entirely separate because many of the items do overlap. It's not like they're completely separate items between what we come up with and what others come up with. Many suggestions we receive from objective sources, other people, and objective truth, the Lord, were already in either the open or closed areas of the Johari window. It is only those items that are in the blind area that you must figure out a strategy for uncovering them and moving them from the blind area to either the open or the closed areas. So as illustrated in the section on the mental model, we must be in a constant search for that objective truth. All of us have experienced objective opinions that don't align with objective truth. All of us have, which makes us cautious when we hear objective opinions because it doesn't mean automatically that objective opinion automatically aligns with that objective truth. So we also must do the same thing with our subjective opinions, though, right? That our subjective opinions may not align with that objective truth either. So I think we can all agree on this. So, for example, that the laws in our society would be objective truth. Otherwise, we need to obey them. Otherwise, it'd be anarchy. And that these laws are necessary because without these laws, people would be harmed. Have you ever considered the fact that every law in society has some type of morality? There isn't one law in society, not one, that doesn't have morality attached to it. Now, I remember sitting in my government class in 9th grade, and the topic of the Prohibition era in America came up. And my teacher asked us at the conclusion of the discussion what the ultimate reason why the prohibition did not work. He proceeded to answer his own question by saying, because you can't make laws against people's morals. Immediately, I was 14, but something sprung up in me, and I immediately raised my hand I didn't give him an opportunity to call on me, and I proclaimed, "What law exists that is not based in morals?" Of course, he didn't respond, but every law is a law rooted in morality, where individuality is secondary to protecting the rights of others first and then ourselves. Even speed limits are set because objective truth states that if the primary emotional goal in determining driving laws were individuality and autonomy driven, excuse the pun, the consequences would be catastrophic, right? I'm absolutely pounding the point that the only way to have a successful society is for all of us to submit ourselves to objective truth standards like rational, healthy, wise, and right. It's objective truth, not only on the macro societal level, but also all the way down to our micro personal level in the formation of who we are as people. There is objective truth that we need to align ourselves to because it's rational, healthy, wise, and right. So to illustrate how to apply the contrasting of the subjective and the objective view of self, okay? So my view versus other people's view. Allow me to use an illustration from in marriage counseling, which is parenting. So as parents, we strive to raise great kids, right? And as we parents know, it's sometimes a very, very arduous process. Why is it sometimes so difficult? The degree of difficulty is directly correlated to how much our child disagrees with our proposed point B for them, right? Why would they disagree with us? Well, from infancy, we're all born with a tenacious drive to improve our quality of life using the path of our choice to achieve that goal, right? From infancy. This process continues throughout childhood and into our teenage years. We try to coach our children to understand the difference between their subjective view of themselves to a more objective view of themselves, right? What they want versus what should be. It's, of course, a never-ending process of helping our young ones evaluate their paths through the objective, rational, healthy, wise, and right grid, or at least, some form of it. Our children, like us, fight against the application of this grid because all of us are committed to our own mental models, okay? That's the issue. We're very committed to what our brain produces, which, as stated earlier, is what we want to do. Our children inevitably learn the skill to evaluate us and resist the rational, healthy, right and right process, and only grows because they evaluate the evaluator. When we say to them, the process of you can't separate the message from the messenger. Better interpreted as whenever a person suggests you need to change, your hypocrisy scanner magically appears and is activated. With our children, this happens in three ways when we get scanned by them. First, children have their own opinion on our point A and point B and want to know what's taken us so long to get to our point B. Secondly, they get upset or frustrated because we disagree with them on what our point B should be. And finally, they struggle with losing respect for us if we are blind to our point B and invokes a double standard or urgency to change is too low. If we want for this transition from our kids to be subjective to objective, we must model it before them. Having strong principles and having the correct thing is paramount. So we hold them accountable. But additionally, we need to be humble, own our mistakes, and show them how to recover from failure, because we know it is easy for our children to feel like they are constantly failing. Conversely, lacking humility in us, it discredits us and we lose their respect. So show them how to be teachable, please, and teach them how to fail, please, as well, and how to recover and grow. Show them how to achieve both goals of grace and truth within yourselves and with them. If we want them accountable to objective truth, rational, healthy, wise, and right, then we need to model it for them. Our children need to feel that we are not forcing them into a mold of our own making. I encourage parents to show their children that the goals for our parenting are objective and ubiquitous, which means it's present for everyone. And successful parenting is actually defined by our children becoming this: independent, successful, mature adults. Okay, so it's not from us, it's this objective standard. So say to them, look, I am not imposing my ideals and values on you. My goal is to equip you and to coach you to become an independent, successful, mature adult. Think of it like this. On the one end is the 25-year-old, let's say Greg, right? And here is this person is independent, successful, mature, right? And on the other end is you at your current age. So a child at 8 or 14 or whatever. So there's a gap between this child with their current ages and them as a successful, independent, mature adult, let's say 25. So when you're 25, you will look back at your current age and have the exact same advice that I'm giving you right now. I love you and I want to equip and coach you to become that person from where you are now to what you will be like as an independent, autonomous, successful, mature adult. I would say, like, where I'm selfish in the process is I'm doing everything I can to make sure that your future college roommate and your future spouse don't disparage me over the fact that they are having to deal with your lack of independence, lack of success, lack of maturity. So let's keep working at it. Kids need a strong investment in coaching from their parents to help them become the best version of themselves, where they are now to where they should be as an independent, autonomous, successful, mature adult. Parental coaching does not shy away from correction. It realizes the power of encouragement and continually equips them for the real world. So it's not about us. It's about equipping our children. The countless number of parents I've presented this mindset feel a great sense of relief because it eliminates the fight that the child perceives as the parents imposing their own opinions on them. Like rational, healthy, wise, and right, there is objective truth among all humanity when we say that our children should become independent, successful, and mature, right? So what does that mean? There's a standard that we all know. Every parent everywhere at any point in history agrees with that. Furthermore, like rational, healthy, wise, and right, it's pointless to define those terms because everyone everywhere at any point in history instinctively understands the impact solid parenting has, and it becomes obvious when it's neglected. Applying this process is rhetorical, right? It doesn't need an explanation. It's common sense. It's ubiquitous. It transcends all cultures, all nations, all times, to train our children to be independent, successful, and mature. Objective truth kind of hovers over all of us, right? And all of our individual point Bs, where we are point A to get to point B, all of our individual point Bs and paths not only impact us personally, but also impacts the lives of others. There must be rules, boundaries, and standards by which all humans align themselves. In spite of any frustration it may cause, as it may appear to block their main emotional goal of individuality and autonomy. It is also important to teach our children to incorporate objective values, such as selflessness. Children obviously don't recognize automatically the long-term impact of their born with individuality and autonomy. That's their focus. So if they stay that way, they don't realize the impact, but pursuing these emotional goals like selflessness creates great emotional reward for them long term. And if this process becomes cemented, it's beautiful. But if they stick to individuality and autonomy, it becomes a long-term process where it hurts a great deal. And the key emotional intelligence skills are impulse control and delay of gratification. And that's what we want to teach our kids. So a principle I give to parents, in addition to raising them to be independent, successful, and mature, is the principle of duty and discipline before dopamine. Okay? As adults, we do this every single day. Any independent, successful, and mature adult practices this principle. We work before we play. We do our household responsibilities before we relax. It's standard, and it should be standard. Adults come to me for counseling want to be better equipped at applying this principle. They recognize that they are suffering the consequences within themselves of not mastering this one principle, mainly because their parents did not fulfill the goal of truth and boundaries, but emphasized the goal of grace and empathy, leading to their enablement. As adults, they're now suffering from low impulse control and find themselves constantly choosing the wrong, rational, healthy, wise, and right path to achieve their emotional goals and are suffering because of it. We need to train our children these principles so they may have hope for a future of personal and relational success. The resistance we may experience from our children is understandably rooted in their quest for the reward of the immediate emotional goal being met, right? What they want right now. Yet their short-sightedness prevents them from seeing the future unintended consequences of either choosing their immediate emotional goals or non-rational, healthy, wise, and right paths to achieve their emotional goals. As I mentioned before, there's a copious amount of scriptures, along with John 1:14, which I've stated before. Jesus came full of grace and truth, right? Trying to achieve both goals in every situation, that have been foundational in the formation of basic theories in my career. I'm going to go to the book of Proverbs now, because in Proverbs it states that the goal for us is to search for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding as if it were literally hidden treasure. So Proverbs 2 verses 1 through 11 states, "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, if you look for it as you would for silver and search for it as it was hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will absolutely guard you." If you must search for something, that means you have yet to find it, and therefore means what? You don't possess it. Secondly, notice the intensity, and this is the biggest piece here. Notice the intensity and the desperation by which we are to search for knowledge, insight, wisdom, and understanding. We turn our ear to it, meaning we are open to it. Next, it states that we call out for it and cry aloud for it and search for it as if it were hidden treasure. Think of all the things in life right now you are the most desperate to obtain. We cry out for a solution to our finances, to the pain in our marriage, to the suffering of being under a poor leader at work, etc. But we also should be crying out for insight and wisdom and understanding. To summarize a major proposition of this book, we must first understand how we may be blind in areas, right? And grasp the fact that our mental models produce suggestions and conclusions that should be evaluated, and to seek insight and wisdom, revealing to us exactly the areas where we are blind. These safeguards will help improve our thinking formulas and equip us with a more effective responses. So be warned, though, that the information we discover in wisdom and knowledge and understanding, we may not initially agree with and want to reject. Therein lies the battle of humanity, because the truths in wisdom and knowledge and understanding are often found in our blind areas and are very, very difficult to obtain. Quite honestly, incorporating those truths and process it can be very, very painful and hard to do. Unfortunately, we all know relationships where there's a refusal of or agreement with and the adoption of these objective truths. That is lifelong. They just never get it. And even more sadly, they still aren't getting it. I do find, many people open and desirous of this type of insight. However, many people still fail to follow through with the intensity required to discover this insight. That's the key. They don't follow through with the intensity to seek out these insights, and they need to. As I discussed before, teachability, right? Teachability in many ways can be likened unto humility, which is, and like humility is, we say, is considering other people, better than yourself. I promote the word teachability over the word humility because some misinterpret the term humility by believing it is the practice of diminishing their value and worth and exalting other people's value and worth. And that's not the case. Humility is a complex, hard issue. However, teachability when we say that word, it's simply an attribute that we mean that we don't know everything and are open to learning from others. That's why I like teachability over humility. Teachability and humility, though, are the opposite of pride. So what's a practical definition of pride? Pride is this dismissive response to environmental opinions. Pride is when the person concludes they already have all the information and data they need in their mental models, right? I'm good. I don't need anything else. But not only that, they also have the most effective formulas for critical thinking to automatically produce right opinions and conclusions. And frankly put, they don't need your insight. That's pride. They're oblivious to any blind spots and solely focused on their formulas of processing as being superior. That's pride. Being fully transparent, I really greatly struggle having patience with these people. But I must remember that I truly believe at the core of that mindset is a deep, deep vacuum of value and worth in that individual. They default to automatic pride response because it's too painful for them to go through the process of having these deep insecurities exposed, right? On the contrary, teachable people are open to and desirous of information that they don't possess. And secondly, they are open to and desirous of new ways of thinking and adding formulas to their processing. So when teachable people are presented with new information, they can now process it with a new formula or way of thinking or a new set of eyes that they didn't have before. Those of us who remember taking algebra know that in a formula, if the x squared should actually be an x cubed, the product of the formula will be wrong. Just as in our mental model process, wrong formulas means wrong interpretations, biases, assumptions, opinions, and the like of information presented to us. All right. So now let's combine the philosophy of Proverbs chapter 2 with the concept of teachability. I would say most of us only practice reactive teachability. What does that mean? Reactive teachability is when somebody builds up the courage to approach us to point out the fact that we are lacking information, or more difficult yet, we have an incorrect way of thinking. They are nervous to start a conflict, though, because when you address a very legitimate issue, they receive it as feeling unsafe because you're exposing them. Some have no hesitancy in exposing others, right? But the most people do hesitate and avoid it out of fear of conflict. Either way, reactive teachability is when people come into our lives and tell us we need to be corrected in some way. Hopefully it's in a grace and truth way. Those of us who are truly teachable have no problem with that experience. As a matter of fact, we invite it because the insight we want, and we're open to and desirous of that change. We understand that we may have blind areas, of course, and we want to eradicate those blind areas. So isn't that a healthy goal? So ultimately, our maturity and teachability is essential in minimizing and shrinking the three areas of our closed area, our hidden area, and our blind areas within the Johari window. This results in the expanding of our open areas, leading to true life fulfillment because we're open to who we are. You know, we can never arrive to this fulfillment with reactive teachability alone. Okay, now why? So reactive teachability is rarely effective because everyone naturally resists exposing potential faults of others. Why? Out of the obvious fear that it will backfire by triggering that person who will immediately become defensive and then attack them back. It's a hard process for people to do. To be the most effective in eradicating the closed, hidden, and blind areas, we must do more than reactive teachability. Hoping and waiting for others to build up and encourage, come to us, well, it's not going to happen. So we must practice proactive teachability. It is the rational, healthy, wise, and right path of regularly going to people in your life and asking them the hard questions. Where am I blind? How can I grow? How can I get better? But even if we do this, some people may still be hesitant and to be completely honest with us out of the same fear of conflict. So you therefore must pull it out of them. After asking them these questions, follow up by saying, I'm not looking for the obvious information. I want the information that's in the back of your mind that you would never share with me. That is the information I need most desperately. And here's, for two reasons. First, I may be blind to that information and I'm desperate to gain insight, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. The second reason being that you may have an information or opinion or conclusion about me that may be incorrect because of some misunderstanding and experience. I would love the opportunity to correct that. So if you feel this is too extreme, then what other paths can you come up with to get true feedback from others and fulfill the principle of Proverbs 2? You tell me. I'm open to it, right? So considering the application of this technique, is there anyone you know, perhaps even yourself, that desperately needs to practice proactive teachability? Think about them. Don't you wish they would practice proactive teachability and come to you because you know they're blind in areas? As a matter of fact, shouldn't every human being practice this? Isn't this a transcendent principle that everybody should practice? Imagine what our world would be like. Even if you don't receive any new information from the person that you use this technique with, or the information they offer is faulty, think about the transformational impact on each of you through this exercise. What if you practice this at work? What if you practice this with your family? I often ask my clients the question, are you a good wife? Or are you a good husband? Often their answers can be quite humorous. Without even thinking, they may reply, well, there are different areas they need to improve, but yeah, I think so. I would then ask, have you ever asked your wife or asked your husband if you're a good wife or husband? Have you ever asked your children if you are a good parent? If everybody should do this. If we want our bosses to do this with us, imagine if our bosses did this with us. Imagine if all of our relatives did this with us. Imagine if politicians did this. Imagine if all leaders across the world practice proactive teachability. Think about how different the world would be. If we all have blind areas, and if the accumulation of this information is going to be too slow to get it through people just voluntarily coming to us telling us we're blind, then the only way to do it is to go out and seek it as much as you possibly can. So the goal is not just to absorb everything they say. The goal is to eradicate the blind area and create an atmosphere of humility, teachability, and transparency. They're incredibly powerful human traits people admire, and it literally has the impact of motivating and, honestly, in other ways, convicting others to do the exact same. So our mental models are an accumulation of a vast amount of information we've gathered throughout our lives, including, obviously, numerous formulas we use in interpreting and responding to every situation. So, kind of in summary here, these formulas are created from our DNA, life experiences, and choices. As we go through life, our mental models are constantly changing as we gain information and learn how to be more successful in accomplishing both our micro, which again are the here and now emotional goals, and the macro emotional goals of quality of life, standard of living. However, our philosophy of life is comprised of convictions and values and beliefs about morality, and they also impact our quality of life. So our macro goals are pretty huge, but we're always in search of them. Everybody is. So the admission that our mental model may be flawed in more ways than we may be aware of and may consist of numerous blind spots is essential to our mental health and relationships. As we apply the rational, healthy, wise, and right grid to the paths we use to achieve the micro and macro goals, we must also apply it to our philosophy of life. The only way for this to be truly successful is to be obsessed with eradicating the blind areas and consumed with gaining insight, wisdom, and understanding. If you're ready to do this, let's open that door together and walk the path towards the gaining of insight, wisdom, and understanding, unlocking the power of negative emotions. We'll talk soon.